I'm Jason, the creator of Team Rocket Robotics, and it's robot building time.
Just checking in a moment, I see if I got a black eye or not. I was playing around with a new project I'll probably be doing a little bit later on this channel, and I hit myself in the eye with it. But regardless, we got parts complete. Here we go. So there's this guy right here, the back piece. I've got some side armors. I've got a motor pod that's built. More on that in just a moment. And of course, some 3D printed final parts for the electronics tray. And these guys right here, which are the aluminum front structures. Now, an important note on this process of these guys. As you saw in the video there, how I build these things, I glue down paper templates and then I use those to cut things out. Well, that paper template process doesn't work very well on aluminum. The reason for that, it seems to be, is that the spray adhesive that I use, that gets worn off pretty easily by the cutting oil that I use and to put on the aluminum when I cut it with the jigsaw. So these two pieces here, they're pretty darn close to final, but I'm going to use them for now. But likely these are going to become the backup pieces for the front weapon structure. I'm just not entirely sure what formal process I'm going to use to make sure the final ones come out correct, but these will be good enough for now. There's some spots, like if I hold it up there, right there, you can see that whole structure is very close to the edge of the frame, a little too close. So little mistakes like that are what I'm worried about with these pieces. But let's start building this robot. Free tip operating your video gear. Make sure you have the right button in the mixer selected. I don't know how a different one changed. I only normally have two cameras hooked up, but regardless, yeah. Anyway, so here we go. Let me start assembling the robot. So this is the 3D printed frame right here. I'm going to get this guy out of the way, and we're going to start putting some pieces together. But before I do that, I want to weigh these structure pieces and see just how much they actually are. I think this one here is a little bit closer to the proper size, so I'm going to weigh this guy. So this piece is 63 grams, but I do need to check one more thing before I start assembling stuff together. I need to find... Actually, I can just use this one right here. This is one of the motor pods. What I need to do is make sure that the aluminum piece fits in these little channels correctly. Damn it, how did I do that? Right, so I talked about this last time. I had to move these supports back so they wouldn't overlap the motor mounts wouldn't overlap the bolt points, and I didn't do that on these pieces. These cross supports are moved forward. Well, I got to rebuild them anyway. Now I got to figure out the right way to do it. Okay. Anyway. And hey, look at that. I've got the proper shape here, or the proper cutout for the front aluminum frame piece. For the this is going to go on the bottom. I will make more of these for the top, but for now I'm going to actually use one of the screwed up pieces because they can work for the top, but just not the bottom because of the position of the crossbars right here. And let me flip this over here. On the back, I still have bolted to it is a 3D printed template. As you saw in those time lapse, what I did differently this time is that instead of using a paper template to cut this out, I used a 3D printed template, and it worked a lot better. It's not perfect yet. I got a few issues to work out, but it's a lot better. So what I think I'm going to do is when I've got this all said and done with and all the things figured out, I'll probably do an entire tutorial video on how to do this 3D template thing for hand cutting out pieces of aluminum. But let's get this robot assembled. Before I assemble the robot, I've got one thing I need to check. This is one of the test motor mounts. I want to make sure it fits over these two aluminum brackets right here. You can see that the aluminum frame's a little bit too big, so I'm gonna have to grind that down or file that down a little bit. Whoops. So here's one of the actual drive pods attached to the frame. And what I've basically tried to do ever since the very first version of Micro Flash was to have this thing be modular, to where I can easily rip parts out and replace them as needed. And I think I accidentally did that with Delta. For the drive pods here, I'm going to be able to remove the entire side along with the drive pod, pop it out from the side of the robot, and put it back in as needed. At least on paper that works. I think this is the best chance I've ever had to do this before. So let me build another one of these drive pods, and then from there we'll build the entire frame. Second motor pod is done. I feel like the motors spin more or less the same. Now let's build the frame of the robot and see if I can slide these things in from the side. You gotta buy these 3mm bolts online, these giant kits. I need like 10 bolts out of it. And I don't know where the rest of them are. Apparently I've lost them because I only have two left. And I really need another set just as a backup for the weapon motor. I mean, it's more or less spinning parallel to the ground, so I would say the shaft is more or less vertically aligned. Let's tighten everything down. First motor pod is in. A few adjustments had to be made. Some extra holes need to be better drilled, and this didn't fit, and well, I got this in. It's a little tricky. But now let's move on to the second motor pod. Actually, I got to wire it up first, but then we'll move on to the second motor pod. From a structural standpoint, installing the motor pods went great. From an electrical standpoint, it's a real pain to screw the wires into the ESC because how the ESC lines up with this particular motor. I just can't get a frickin' break sometimes. But future versions of Micro Flash are going to be using brushless motor controllers and brushless motors, so this won't be an issue too far into the future, so I'm not going to freak out too much about it. But with all that installed, let's get some wheels on this guy, do some test drives, and then figure out where I stand for the weight. We can call this portion of the build done. Now after the test drive is done, it is time to figure out how much this robot weighs at the moment, do some math with some spreadsheets, and see where we stand. So let me get my scale out here. And I'm clocking in at 1,137 grams. 1,137 grams. Let's jump over to some Google Sheets and figure out where things are. So time to create a new section here in the spreadsheet. So let's go current mass, or technically, whatever. I use grams interchangeably as weighted mass. I don't really care. So currently we're at 137, and what I'm going to do now is do remaining of the other categories. So remaining structure, remaining weapon, remaining drive, and let's get in order here. So let's do remaining electronics, and then remaining drive. What we got to do now is go through each of these 4 sections and figure out what parts are not on the robot yet and factor their math into these 4 categories. Well, there we go. I've added all the weights up for everything that's still remaining, and we're looking really, really good. 1297 grams. That's at the moment 60 grams underweight. So I'm liking that. That's a good position to be in. Very, very good position to be in. I mean, I can do some cool stuff later on, but more on that probably later in the build process. With the math done and things looking great, let's call this process of the build done. So thank you for watching this build report of Micro Flash Delta, my 3-pound combat robot. Things are getting pretty close here. Got a few pieces of structure left to finish, but I'm just gonna do that off camera. It's nothing really big. And then it's time to work on the weapon, which is the biggest improvement in terms of, well, reliability that I have to do for this robot, because it failed within 10 seconds of every single fight last time. So that's probably what the next episode in the build is going to be about. So if you want to catch that one, be sure to hit subscribe, turn on notifications, hit the like button, blah, 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 YouTube, blah, blah. Until then, thanks for watching, and have a great week.